Okay, we're back. And here is Daria. She should be switching on. Perfect.
Work.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi.
Wait.
It's
Hi, how are
right
you?
now.
Good to see
Good.
you.
It's good to see you too. It's good to hear you, and I feel like I miss you.
Miss you too. It's
So
been too long.
I know, and hopefully it won't have to be as long. Hopefully the conventions and fairs will pop back up, and somehow magically this will all get better very soon.
Oh, I hope so too. God.
So for everyone joining us, here's Daria, and sorry about the technical issue before. I'm gonna switch back now from me to the artwork. Hold on. Okay, so here are two awesome examples of Daria's work. And for those who are new to what she does, these are multi-step pieces. They're shadow boxes. They're both works on paper and sculpture, and we'll get close to show you guys the levels of depth and the depth and the layers that are quite apparent, sorry, in the work. But as you can see, the work itself is suspended. It's almost collaged in many senses where you have layers and you have a great sense of shadow play. So it's almost as if you have this living painting that's or drawing that's about to kind of take motion. As Daria, you'll see here, uses ink washes as well as ink
Correct.
itself. You have those finer lines there, and then you have what's more a bit of a wash incorporated with that. So she'll go into specifics about that today. We'll definitely cover some things that we spoke about last time. Unfortunately, I didn't know how to save the videos until Nicholas Bruno told me about, what is it? It's like screen capture with video. So
Hmm.
now we have them all going to YouTube and they're all being saved. So I apologize for
Awesome.
anything, yeah, that we might go through again, but I definitely think it's worth it because we will have that all saved for everyone to look at in the future. So Dari, tell us a bit more about your medium. Tell us what first led you to working with ink and creating shadow boxes, and then we'll take it from there.
So I've always been fascinated with ink work. I used to work flat, actually. I'm drawn to ink because it requires you to think through from what you're doing before you start doing it. So you have to have a full-on concept ready so you don't make a mistake. Because once you make a mistake with ink, the piece is basically, trash, or at least that's how I view it. And to start working 3D, that actually was through a happy mistake, so to say. So I was working on a flat piece for an exhibition, and I spilled ink on it the night before. And I didn't have time to redo the whole piece, so I started cutting out the parts that were still okay. And after redoing the background and starting to reapply the layers, I noticed that there is something there that I could push. And yeah, I've been pushing it for almost 4 years now.
Yeah. And I'm so excited you're doing so. I remember when I first found you on, I think it was probably Instagram. I was so over the moon because I had not seen anybody do shadow boxes at that point. And further, for those that I've seen, they were just not to my taste. Your work was just exactly what I loved and what I always wanted to show at the gallery because it was narrative, but it was also stylized. And there was just an abundance of imagination and your own personal touch to these stories that you created of your own, but also reinterpreted throughout history. So it was a very exciting thing for me. And you had mentioned also that you wanted to reach out to us too. So that was really
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
You
I get a
sent me
little
the email the
overzealous.
week before I was going to send you one, so it was
Yeah.
perfect.
And ever since, we've had such a wonderful response to Daria's work. And hopefully, with this video today, you'll get that in person experience that having these works hung at the gallery often, provide people with. And they're always so much more happier and surprised in person because the images and even the videos too, they just don't give you that sense of depth and movement that having these cut layers suspended in such a way offer. So guys, as you join on, send questions. Even if they were questions from last time, I'm sure people would like to hear them this time. And also when they watch the video in the future, have those questions addressed too. So these are two pieces that represent a couple years apart in their creation. We have Feeding
That's
Frenzy
correct.
here, and then we have Auspicious Peace. So let's talk a little bit about Feeding Frenzy. It's an awesome piece. It's one of your largest shadow boxes to date. Hopefully you can
Not
see
much longer.
for scale. Not much longer. There's something in the works coming up that's bigger, but you guys can kind of see. I have very small hands, by the way. I don't know if that helps with perspective. but I'll back away a little bit and you can kind of see the tables we've been using. So she's quite big. So tell us what the story is behind her, and any inspiration that you might have brought in to decide to create this shark in space, essentially consuming all these planets.
So it's gonna sound a little silly. So sharks are cool, right? Pirate sharks are even better. So I looked into Hawaiian mythology for this one, and the burial rites, olden burial rites there, you used to donate the body to the sharks because sharks were deities that would lead you to fishing sites. So that was my interpretation on basically a shark god going mad and starting consuming the world around him and leading a swarm behind him as well that's attacking. So it's a little more aggressive than the actual mythology, but
But it's your interpretation. And I
yeah,
feel like having that a bit of aggression, especially following him, it gives it movement and it gives it just a fluidity and almost a dance of your medium that I think otherwise would be too stagnant. So I think it's an awesome interpretation. And I'm glad you added all that.
thank you. He was that was still the part when I was oil painting and doing the shadow boxes at the same time before I gave up on the oils. And he was part of kind of a larger series of spacefaring deities. I have also like three like space nebula girls that are welcoming spaceships, like NASA spaceships, but it's the older pieces. I might actually redo them one day
I think
as
you
shadow
should.
box. They would offer themselves pretty well to that.
I think
So
so for sure. I mean, everyone kind of loves the idea of sharks and space, especially now. I feel like it's such a viral image that you see floating around in general. I remember when Joseph opened up the package of artwork when we had first got Feeding Frenzy, and he was like, "This is awesome!" And it just embodied everything because he loves sharks. He collects, I don't know, mastodon teeth. I think they're not mastodon. I don't know, some kind of prehistoric shark. He likes those teeth, but he also loves Saturn, which he integrates in his own work, as you know. Um, but I mean, space itself kind of intermingling the sea with the air, or in this case, obviously space, I think is just so imaginative and creative. And, you kind of think about the movement of the shark underwater, similar to what of that would be in space, because you're kind of limited in the movement. It's really awesome. So here
thank
you
you.
guys go, Feeding Frenzy. And I do hope you continue to explore more space-oriented pieces as well. And if you guys want more close-ups of any of these pieces as we go into them, just let me know, and I will come right back to them. So now moving on to Auspicious Beast. So
Mhm.
I know we went through her quite a bit last time, but that's now gone in Instagram space. Oh, we have a question about the shark. So let's finish with the shark, and then we'll go back. So the question is, what made you add so much texture to the shark?
So I used to shade with pure cross hatching versus washes and hatching. So that basically I went bananas with crosshatch before I discovered that I could do it with washes and push my light even further. Because I don't particularly, while I did use black fill, especially inside the mouth of the shark, I don't like using black fill because it's too stark and too aggressive for my pieces. I very, very rarely actually make use of it. So most of it is just endless crosshatch. And it started actually hurting my wrist pretty bad too. So I had to figure out how to work smarter rather than more extreme. So, and it was one of my earlier ink pieces too, I guess, is the best, or earlier shadow box pieces. So I learned more how to abstract and how to take away detail because, as we all know, in abstraction lies perfection. With the less strokes you can say what you're trying to say, the closer you are to mastering a craft. So,
And so just for the comparison, you guys can again see all that cross hatching, which is an awesome technique, but as Daria mentioned, very strenuous compared to a more recent piece where for the shading, she's going about using ink washes a bit more to achieve that. Is that correct?
that's correct. I still use crosshatch, especially if you go down and you look at the rocks.
Yeah.
I use crosshatch and I back it with washes. so that I have an even stronger depth going.
There you guys go. So you can kind of see that again, that comparison. So thank you for that question. And now continuing to talk about auspicious beasts. This is a mythological piece. And so if you mind giving us the history, let's talk about each animal again, about her, about the landscape behind her, and anything else that comes up.
Of course. So that piece, I've been quite fascinated with Chinese, Korean, and Japanese mythology in general, but Chinese came to the forefront lately. And those are the three benevolent beasts that greet a ruler. And the first one, the horse-looking dragon thing, is a Kirin or a Kilin. And usually they only allow a new ruler or a person pure of heart to ride them. So that's why you see the halo behind the girl as well. And actually her halo represents the four different, it's supposed to resemble a compass and represent the four different directions. So it ties directly into the round pieces that I've been doing with the mythological beasts that are representative of north, south, west, east.
Oh, did you freeze?
No, no, no. I'm
Okay.
holding it still.
Oh man, you stayed so
Sorry.
still just now. You know, it's going to the innocence idea and purity. I mean, her demeanor and her expression, they're all so pure and innocent, and they completely support that notion.
Thank you. So I basically imagined, so there's a lady or a woman bathing at a lake. You see the pagoda in the background as well by the beasts. And the beasts show up to her to greet her and pick her up. So between the Kirin, it's called the Black Warrior. The turtle is called the Black Warrior, if I'm not completely wrong. And it's a beast of the north. So it's a turtle that continuously fights a snake. And they're also representative of someone who's benevolent, as well as the Zoyu. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the names today.
No, it's a lot to remember.
As well as the Zoyu, which is the lion cat-like flower thing. So there's not a lot of mythology. You actually saw a representation of that beast recently, well, within the last 2 years in oh God, Fantastic Beasts, the Harry Potter, the pre-Harry Potter thing, yeah. So they picked it up fairly recently. There's not a lot of writing, so on the beast, it's presumed that people confuse the panda with a large cat because it's supposed to have a body between a panda and a tiger, a head of a lion, and a flower tail, or like plant-like tail. So I had complete freedom to go and do whatever I wanted with this one.
And just so you
and
guys,
they said to only bow to a future benevolent ruler as well. So it's all about the innocence and discovering innocence in this one.
and in this case, I want to show you that this is actually the shadow that the tail is casting. I mean, obviously, wherever this piece is hung, the shadow play will be different, but it is quite lovely because it almost mimics your ink washes, that kind of gradual, change of tone and of value in the medium. And it's a really beautiful shadow. As you can see elsewhere too, you have the shadow of the female too. So those are the three. And so why did you pick the background that you did? Just because of the association with the mythology, or like why outdoors? Why a barren tree? Tell us a bit more about those decisions.
The barren tree is just filler. I'm not gonna lie. It looked good there.
I mean, you could have done a cherry blossom. There are so many other trees or ideas.
That would be so freaking tiny. If I do a cherry blossom, I have to do the tiny little like petals flying too. It's a problem. But no, so the background, if you actually zoom out, you can see the mountains And in China, there is a lot of mountains. So I try to represent in general the how you would encounter a lake in China with the little lily, the big lily pads right around the pagoda and the pagoda itself. So it's
Right.
supposed to be a very tranquil place that you could escape to, and the main character basically did. So there's always kind of a pre-story to the piece, right? And I try to, I don't get my ideas like a lot of artists do where it just comes to you. My ideas come to me more in a form of a short trailer. That's the best way to describe it. So imagine me seeing like a minute-long movie in my head, and then I just need to pause it at the right moment to get the right movement and everything like that, which presents its own challenges. So yeah, my creative process is a little bit hard, to
I think
say
it's
the
really
least.
fascinating you say that, though, that it's almost like a trailer of a movie, because I've always, and I've mentioned it to you many times, found your work to be extremely cinematic. There's this idea that it's, perhaps like an older movie because of the black and white approach, but you have this encapsulation of this moment. But because of the way that you've built up your piece, you have the sense of movement, and you have the sense that it's about to start, going. The story is continuing. And so,
Mhm.
as you guys can see, I mean, the way that she will fasten like the leg, for instance, from the knee down, it almost reminds you of like a ball jointed doll, but
Oh
it's so
yeah.
indicative of movement. And the same thing with all the hair flowing. And as many of you have seen with Daria's work, she loves her detail as much as it drives her crazy, and she loses some finger skin maybe in the process. She never stops. And so whether it's candles or blossoms, or hair or whatever it is that she's found to do next, she does it in full throttle. So guys, check that out too. And so a couple more questions have popped up. Let me just find them back
Mhm.
here. Um, so next question is it awkward to try to create these strange creatures?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Yep. She's asking if it's awkward to create such strange creatures.
If it's awkward,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say awkward. It's actually quite freeing. The less roadmap you have for a creature, the more fun it becomes because you can really just grasp onto whatever you find aesthetically pleasing. So, as you can see, a lot of my characters have long flowing hair.
Yes.
So I really find, the big hair pleasing and curly hair very pleasing, to the eye and to the touch itself. So hence the creation of the creatures. And that with the tiger pattern on the Zoyu, I always loved how tiger fur looked and how it moved, especially as the tiger moved. So it's always depends. It's not awkward per se. It's more exciting, I would say.
Is it more challenging too because now you have to piece together these different chimeric elements to make it look like one cohesive creature?
It's not what I would actually say it's easier. The less of a premise I have, the easier it is to work.
Because they all
I'm
look
I'm I
connected.
overthink things way too much. So the second I have a theme, it just completely shuts me down because I start overthinking it and nothing becomes good enough for whatever piece I'm trying to create.
That's
So
why
the
we
less,
get such immaculate works.
yeah, right. The less the less I'm given, the better. So
You've always done really well with all our themes. These two pieces don't come from themes that the gallery Haven has provided, but I think you've always kind of nailed whatever the theme was for us or others, and done something that's quite new, or at least a really interesting and fresh interpretation of existing stories and characters.
the elements, the one show, the elements, that threw me for a loop though, because I'm like, okay, elements. And you mentioned something with ether, and I'm like, okay, alchemy. And I got like four alchemy books that I read through, and then I actually reached out to you, and I'm like, this is about alchemy, right? And you're like, no.
But I mean, with shows, the concepts are intended to be as loose as possible. So if you go someplace that I didn't expect, go for it. I mean, I never want to stand in the way of what you're going, for, and
Not
what you're
lots of
excited about
alchemy.
pursuing. it's only when it's like really abstract, and then you have a group show of all these pieces that tell, different parts of a very large story, and then you have one that just is kind of like, huh? And then everyone kind of looks at that piece for their only reason of saying, oh, well, I don't get it. Why is this a part of this show? And so it's, there's the fringes of the theme that I think are still okay to, go for. And I think that, it wasn't the intention, but it wasn't a bad departure from it. It's only when, it, and many times we've had works too where they just make absolutely no sense with respect to the theme. They might have just been whatever that artist wanted to create at that time. And then I can't even explain it to the viewer or those coming into the gallery. But I mean, work needs to be appreciated for many different reasons. So we all kind of find that connection. It doesn't always have to be so specific to the theme. I just like the themes because I find that I like learning about them, and I like seeing what you guys do and learning from what you choose to pursue. And of course,
Yeah, I
sharing that
always
with
take
your
it a step
viewers.
too far, as you know.
Yeah. So our next question is, do you get inspired by Japanese mythology?
Hmm. That is actually my main inspiration. I'm fascinated with societal premise in Japan in general. So I'm fascinated with the culture, with the respect of nature, respect of trade, respect of craft. Because the Japanese generally are more mindful, in my opinion. So
Hmm.
they are present in the moment, and they are present with whatever object they occupy themselves with. So be
I
it
agree.
mythological or be it, actual real. So that drives it. I read actually a lot of Japanese mythology. The storytelling is just somehow better to me. I don't know. I have a weird fascination. It's been that way throughout my young teenage years as well. So that's when I first encountered it, and it kind of stuck with me. So I'm grasping from what I've learned over the years. Sadly, I have not yet visited. I wish one day, I hope I can go.
You will. You have to, because I have that same penchant as you do. And so it's just, I don't know, it's there's a very poetic quality to the stories and the characters and the visual execution of much of this. And as you said, there's this sense of value and integrity in their
Hmm.
heritage and in their mythologies and in things as, current as what they do for a living. And when we were there visiting, we noticed that everyone seemed so grateful for whatever position they held in society because they were all a contribution to the greater force at large. And that's something that I don't see as much here in America, at least from my experience. And it just stood out to me as such a beautiful attribute of Japanese society and their mentalities. So I agree. And
I
I
agree.
think that's one
That's
of the reasons
beautifully
why
put.
yeah, that's one of the reasons I was always attracted to your work because your work has that sensibility aesthetically, but also I think it has that poetic and that very, I don't know like what other word I'd find to explain it. There's just something serene, as you mentioned, with this particular piece, but I don't know, it's very akin to that. And you can tell, I think, upon close inspection of your work and the way that you render in general, that you can definitely be heavily inspired by the visual arts of Japan, as well as poetry and writing and mythology that you might have spent some time looking into. And so another question,
Hmm.
behind the hairs. Okay, so I think someone's asking about how you lay your hair. And so perhaps if you look at this character, you can see that there's a couple layers of hair. How many would you say? Can you see?
I believe, oh God,
One,
seven, maybe eight. Let me see. One, two, three,
this,
four, five.
can you see? Sorry, I moved. I was trying to count.
I think seven, because you got to count in front of his face as well. Sorry,
Yeah,
guys,
and
you're
there's
getting like a close up on my forehead.
there's many layers, and it really gives that, kind of caught in the wind, that three-dimensional form and feel of that creature. He's really
Ah,
magnificent.
there's one more layer hiding below, all the way below by the
In
legs.
here, right?
Yep, that's a separate layer. Yep.
Yeah, I was trying to look there before, but then I was like moving the camera. So, let's see. Are there other questions? All
So
right.
I've gotten actually better about counting certain elements as I'm working on them. As I usually just don't. I just look at the piece and then I just start going and I separate it as I go. I used to have to number that kind of thing and go through it very carefully and pre-plan. Nowadays, I see it in my head right away most of the time. So I just start, I have my main concept that I sketch out, and then I just start working from that and just like break it apart as I go.
I mean, I'm always mesmerized by artists who work in, shadow boxes or medium because it's something where you have to think forward but also think backwards. It's extremely difficult to kind of foresee everything so early on. And I think as a person, you have to be extremely patient and detail oriented, which if you had
Sorry.
no perception of how much work goes into all these layers, at least just looking at all the technique, I mean, all the beautiful line work that takes a remarkable amount of patience. It's almost, tedious to an extent when you see all that cross hatching here too, for example. All the planning. There's so much to it. And the way that Daria suspends her work, she'll talk about a bit more, but it's almost invisible. You can barely see it, and you really do have to look for it. And she's also gone into quite a number of shock tests to ensure that her work does hold up, so it's not as fragile as one may think. She also uses archival material, which is
Mhm.
important to note. Often with inquiries that we receive on shadow boxes, they wonder about the weight of the paper and if it will wilt or bow over time. And of course, the adhesive and any way that the work itself is suspended. So let's talk a bit more about that.
Mhm. So I actually calculate the weight of each piece before suspending and calculate also what suspension needs to be. And I try to work with the viewer's eye as well. So I look around to see where I can place it without the viewer noticing that there's a suspension. I use a proprietary material that I source for myself and I get made for me. I also nowadays started using for really, really tiny details and details that my suspension material cannot hold because it is flexible. I started using museum needles, which I grind down.
Is that what these are
Um,
here?
those are museum needles. So uh, those are specific needles that are used by museums to preserve bugs and similar. So they will never, bow or bend or anything else. That requires a very different technique from what I'm usually do, but the material that I use actually is flexible and because paper has to breathe, right? So one second here. I have paper on my table, of course. Paper constantly does this, right? Your eye can see it because it goes very, very slow, but it contracts and expands as well as sweats depending on the humidity and temperature. And you have to allow that paper to do that because if you don't, if you glue it all over and or completely to something else, it will at some point go so hard and tear so hard on itself or warp so hard on itself that it will actually rip. So it might take a few years, but it will happen. My suspension technique allows it, and I was perfecting it for 2 years before I actually put it out into the world, allows the piece to move because the feet that it stands on can do this, right, in any direction, but they resume their shape whenever necessary. So they're not only protected against time, they're also protected against shock and or vibrations. So while shipping or, when throwing it across the room. Actually, so I see you actually question about shock testing. So one of my neighbors here is obsessed with all sorts of health stuff, one of the photographers, and he has a vibra plate. So it's really, really weird device that you can stand on. It's pretty large and it vibrates your whole body and it's really weird, but I use it for actually testing all the connections. So I put it on a vibra plate. So,
And prior to that, did you just kind of shake them a bit, or did you always have
so
that
yeah,
vibration?
they go on there for about 30 minutes, and if nothing has moved, if nothing has shifted, that means the connections are secure and
Yeah,
they can go out in the world. So,
it's a good studio neighbor to have.
right?
Oh, and someone also mentioned that it's your birthday tomorrow, which I did not know. So happy
Today's
early
my last day in
birthday.
my 20s.
I hope Burrito has a big plan for you.
He's been
Is he
keeping me
here?
up at night, so I don't know. He actually is. Yeah, I can
Oh,
pull him up.
so we're all gonna meet Burrito if you guys haven't already. This is now my probably third time meeting him digitally.
Sweet
Oh
boy.
my gosh, he looks like he got so big. Did he get bigger?
I feel like he's growing, yeah.
How
He's
about
either
that?
growing or getting heavier, one or the other. I see.
Yeah, look at him. Was he sleeping?
Oh yeah, he sleeps all day pretty much and
Oh,
tries to sleep all night.
oh, he's so
Mm,
cute.
mm.
The burrito's become a little famous on the internet. I think he has his own Instagram page as well.
He
Daria
does.
had saved him when he was very young, and he gets along quite well with her dogs too, right?
Oh yeah, he does.
But
They
he's an
don't
excellent.
snuggle as of yet, but they do clean each other, which is very cute.
Give him time. I
I
feel like
hope
animals are
so.
always opening up and surprising you. But yeah, so another thing that we should talk briefly about
Mhm.
is your framing. Your framing always stands out to me. It's beautiful, it's elegant, but it doesn't conflict with your pieces. I think you take great care in selecting the right finish, the right tone, the right thickness, and the right level of detail. So you actually spend time working with a framer to hone the technique. So instead of spending a ton of money through custom framing, you would do the same job probably better because of how well you know your
Yeah,
work.
still a ton of money.
Yeah, and
I'm
yeah,
not
save
gonna lie.
save a ton, which any artist listening should think about doing in the future because Daria does it in such a magnificent way. She uses such high quality materials, which again, I'm sorry for the glare of the lights behind me and my phone in this non-ideal setup. But you can kind of see just what a beautiful presentation the framing offers, and also the fact that the interior, which hopefully, let me see if I can get it. I'm sorry for the reflection on my end, which is all again not the glass. It's the bad room that we're working out of. But I mean, all the interior sides are finished. She has ink washes throughout. If you look at the top, and then there's a shot bar at the bottom. No, nothing's left behind. So keep that in mind whenever you guys look at her work. Yeah, I'm sorry, my phone is not good for this. It creates that strange light. But if you do have the opportunity to see them in person, look at every square inch of them because they are perfect. And
Thank
so,
you.
yeah, you're
I try.
welcome. So, do you have what you've been working on close by? Can we look more at the
Yes,
progress of
I
that?
actually do. So we gotten a little further. I think we've put about so far, or sorry, I keep saying we. I actually stream on Twitch, and I've been streaming the whole progress. She's huge, but currently
Oh my
she's held
gosh.
with, together. The box is held with blue tape together,
Oh,
um,
oh
because
wow.
it's not skinned as of yet. So this is the current mock-up for the
Wow.
box. It's
She
six
looks
inches
beautiful.
deep, 33 and some change by. Oh, don't let me lie, between 17 and 18 inches.
How
And
many layers will she have?
flowers alone, we got 42, and the leaves that I've been cutting that go into the tail is 52.
I
So
love how you know these numbers by heart.
I had to cut a lot of leaves and flowers lately. Like that's just, the cut ones, there's still these guys.
Yeah, in time.
So yeah,
And how
yeah,
many layers will she have when she's done?
over hundreds, if not 200. Like
Jeez.
because all the flowers and the leaves alone will be separate layers because I want to
Mm-hmm.
make so it's the tail of the fox. You can see the fox right here. Right, he doesn't have a body yet, but he has a back foot. And there's the tail starting with all the flowers.
Oh, wow.
And I want to make it bushy. Like genuinely, I want it to look bushy. So,
That's going to be
um,
incredible. You should be very proud already,
so
but
that's going to
even
be
more
100
so.
layers by itself. Thank you. I think I can. Oh God, 6 inches. I can probably fit in 300 layers without crossing layers.
Wow.
So, yeah. And
She's going to be something to see. So this is for Daria's solo show later this year, and fingers crossed that we'll be able to interact again
um,
with one another at that point.
Yeah, me
Otherwise, you better
too.
expect a lot of videos because this is one piece in particular that we're going to inundate you guys with.
I've actually been, because everything is recorded while I work on it. I want to make time lapses, and I tried with some videos
Yes.
already. But even putting down like every hour to a minute, it's already 15 minutes long.
Oh my
So
gosh, I bet.
time lapse, I don't know.
It would be a longer than normal time lapse and it would have to go quite fast.
Yeah, it looks a little bit like I'm just twitching all the time, really terribly. I just need to cut out my face from it.
No. People love
It's
to see
crazy.
the human behind the work.
Just the hands, nothing else.
And so that particular piece is inspired by Japanese mythology, right?
Hmm. Yes.
So,
So, oh, sorry, you first.
no, tell us more.
So she is basically she's supposed to be summoning a kitsune, which is the messenger of the god Inari, who is responsible for business and uh, grain and nature in general. So I'm trying to make it a nature-like yokai. So I changed out the tail from the usual, multi-tail to flowers and leaves. So I'm probably going to call this piece ritual because it's going to look, there's going to be candles in the foreground and the midground. So she's trying to summon a nature demon, and she's falling in love with it, but it's a trickster at the same time. Hence the mask looking right back at her. So she's not seeing anything past the mask, right? Her full concentration is on the mask, even so there's a whole demon snaking itself around her.
Yeah, she's going to be incredible.
Crossing my fingers.
I, everything better open up because I'm going to be extremely upset if I don't get to see her in person.
Oh, well, the
That's,
good thing I already have part of the frame right behind me for her. Like
oh, good.
this,
This one,
this one
oh, that'll be
hanging.
very
Yeah.
beautiful.
I want to make it even wider, so I'm actually going to be stacking frames.
Which
So
is
it's going to
what
be.
you've done here and what she does for
Mhm.
most of her framework because of the depth itself. There's no frame thick enough to hold that. And so these are actually two frames brought
No,
together.
that one is actually one frame.
Is it one frame?
So
Oh, you're right. It's
um,
seamless all over here. Okay. Sorry, guys. That was my
yeah,
mistake.
that one is
But
one frame.
here we
I
go.
found a manufacturer that goes, there we go. Yeah. So this is with an extension. And I've gotten actually better at building them as well, so I can make them almost seamless. Because I learned how to leaf gold leaf stuff, so now I can actually leaf the frames with the contrast, not contrasting, but the same, like find a similar leafing and leaf them on top.
And just to have it blended together because you have that now skill under your belt. Yep.
Yeah.
And so
So,
remember, guys, questions are good if you have them. We have a bit more time together. And so your background started off in fashion, right? That's what you had pursued out of school,
yes,
and that's where your career
that is,
started.
that is correct. So I actually started I did run a company, a fashion design company for about 10 years. It never was my calling. I slipped into it and I had the skill and, started making money. So it was kind of natural for me because as a, young adult, I didn't know what the fuck to do with myself. So, oh, excuse me, I'm cursing.
It's
What
okay.
to do with myself. And yeah, I basically ran a fashion design company for 10 years and squeezed everything out of myself that I could to the point where I just ended up like, money doesn't make you happy. And I didn't know what to do with myself. So I sold that and started doing art, which now I'm happy.
Good. And you
Open sense.
haven't turned back, and I'm happy too for it. And so is it your work is always very narrative. It's always telling some kind of story. And is that because of your interest in mythology, or does it come from another influence?
I think that comes from working on film sets and commercial shoots because it's always you're trying to tell some sort of a story or If you're doing something for commercial, you're trying to sell a certain want or a certain lifestyle. So it definitely comes from there. So I have some experience with theater. I have experience with actual movie making and things like that. So I'm grasping from there. That's why you also see a very strong divide in my boxes between foreground, midground, background, because that's basically how a theater stage would be built, right? So if next time you're in a ballet or in the theater or opera, look when the stages come down. It's basically a humongous shadow box.
You're
So
right. And again, it leads to that cinematic approach and that
Mhm.
aesthetic.
So that's where the narrative area comes from as well.
Like that makes a ton of sense. And it's what we love at the gallery too. We love artwork that tells a story or evokes some kind of response. And I think your work does both of that in a very elegant way. So, questions going back to your solo show. Do you know
Mhm.
how many pieces will be in it? Someone had asked.
I will try for 12. It might be just one gigantic one, you never know,
She'll just take up the entire wall. Then
right?
we'll hang you right next to her on the wall. And then do you know the theme yet that you'd like to approach overall, or is it something that's going to start to kind of reveal itself as you work on more
It
pieces?
usually Yeah, it usually starts revealing itself after a while. As I spoke about earlier, if I try to do a theme from the start, I just give myself a horrible block. I did that with my first solo with you guys. I just went into a frenzy and just completely killed any and all creativity until I finally just said, you know what? Just make them. Just make them. It will happen. Whatever is coming is going to reveal itself, and that's what happened. So this time I'm just going until I have about, usually it reveals itself by piece number 6.
I
Then
mean, even
I'm,
with your last show, though, I think they came out so solid, and they each had their own independent story. And one thing I was going to actually say to you was, I thought you weren't going to do any more candles, but I guess that's changed.
no, no more thorns. I
Oh, no
still
more
like
thorns.
candles.
You do like the okay, all right. So no more thorns. So we'll see if
Never again.
they come back. Still, you feel this way?
Uh, yes, but I also say that a lot about flowers, and I keep making flowers, so I don't know. I might go back to thorns one day.
They
So,
were really cool.
thank you.
They had a harsher element to an otherwise, like your work, even if it's tackling strong themes, it always is so delicate but solid, and so it works with the dichotomy that exists quite nicely. So
Thank
let's
you.
You're welcome. Is there anything else you want to talk about while we're together today that we may not have touched upon yet?
Mm, can't particularly think of anything.
I think
I don't know. I'm blank.
it's
Anybody
hard to
have any
think
more
these days.
questions? Hmm?
If
I'm
you guys, I was it's very hard to think these days. Time is moving strange, and we're all just kind of
Yeah.
our minds are a bit burnt out from everything. So we'll start to wrap up then. But if you guys have questions, anything else that remains on your minds, now is the time. And just again, a brief overview. This is Feeding Frenzy. Currently, not in progress, largest work to date. What Daria had showed you earlier, Ritual, tentatively titled, is going to be the largest. So this will soon enough be the second largest. And we have Auspicious Feast. And these are both available through the gallery and hung with us. So if you guys want more information, pictures, payment plan breakdowns, anything, I am here to talk with you about that all. And if you have questions outside of that, technically, Daria is usually around too, and she streams live on Twitch, which I've yet to watch because my job's gotten busier than ever somehow, despite the fact that I'm home. But I will one day, and if not, then I'll watch that hour-long time-lapse video that she'll put together at some point. Um, and so that's about it. Thank you guys. Oh, hold on, question came through.
We have one.
Do you meditate?
So this is a really funky thing. So I tried multiple times to meditate the traditional way where you sit down and you just let your mind go blank, and it does not work for me at all. So what actually happens is when I'm inking, is when I reach that meditative state of normal meditation. But whenever I try to actually just sit and meditate, all I can think of is I could be inking.
I was gonna
So
say, I know your mind's probably running rampant while you're staying still because you know that time could be used for other
yeah,
things.
I can't.
And I feel like that's how I am too. But I mean, it's probably extremely therapeutic for you, obviously without any pain that you might encounter when you did the cross hatching, but with your washes and with, you know, just developing strokes in general. And I found that a lot of artists similarly say so, that the more detailed artists they are, especially those working in ink, the more calming they find that working in that you know, extravagant and detailed line work provides for them.
hmm So actually, I think Katie asked that question.
Yes.
I'm a surprisingly impatient person. The only patience that I have is for my art. I'm very, very impatient otherwise. It's really like weird, oxymoron there
The
because I
two
cannot
sides.
wait at all for any. I cannot wait for the floor to dry whenever I'm mopping, right? Like that kind of impatience.
I think I'm the
But
same way.
the second I sit down to actually work on my work, it's a different frame of mind. And you can train that as well. That whole like paying attention. I think I'm at this point, I can sit still for about 12 hours without losing focus. And it started off, I don't know if you know that one, Erica, the Pomodoro technique, I think it's
What is
called,
that?
or the egg timer technique. Like
I
you
am
set
familiar.
5 minutes or 15 minutes first, then whenever it rings, you take a 5 minute break, then you go back, but you keep your full concentration for 15 minutes. And the longer you do it, the further you increase the time. So, make
I
sense?
haven't heard of that, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it's good too
Yeah,
for
you
artists.
can train your attention.
I mean, think of it all like the still, you know, form of your one's body as you're doing all this work too, and kind of breaking that up. Because I imagine if you don't have those gaps, you're just stuck in one position for such a long time, and you're hurting yourself in the future.
Probably. I don't know. My body is kind of adjusted by now. I
I feel
use
like
I
you're
use like a special
superhuman.
chair. Hmm?
You're like a superhuman.
I, we've done some marathon streams actually on Twitch where I was just working because of deadlines. Where I'm just like, okay, we're working for the next 20 hours.
See, I
So
mean,
yeah,
it's awesome, and I'm glad for it because you know one of many attributes of why I think your work is so incredible is because you put all that detail into it, and I'm so glad that it's a very therapeutic experience for you too. So let's
thank
see,
you.
more questions popped up actually while we were talking. Do you ever feel the work gets lost with all the detail?
So the thing with that is, I always have a strong concept before. So it actually got taught to me by another illustrator, Mark Nelson. Um, One of them I actually wrote for the longest time. I wrote on a big piece of paper before and put it in front of my desk. Is like more thinking, less inking. So the more you think your concept through, the better in your idea. And another thing is you go from idea to concept to follow through. So you have 3 stages to your work. So whenever I have my idea, that's the thumbnailing, that's the writing down, that's the research, that's the sketching. Then you arrive at your final piece that you think is correct. And that's when you go to concept. And that's where you sketch that piece out in full size, um, or two size to whatever piece it's going to be. And or you could do it smaller and then scan it in and large it, print it out, trace it. That's what I've been doing lately because it saves a lot of time. Um, and that's your concept stage. And that is the stage where I decide where everything goes. I decide all the detail. I decide how deep it's going to be. I decide how many layers it's going to have, and so on and so forth, right? And then the last stage is all you're doing is you're following through on what you need to do. So you're basically putting in, it's going to sound terrible, mindless ink work because everything is decided beforehand, right? So that's when I transfer it to proper paper, layer by layer, and I start inking it, then I cut it, and then I shade it. and then I suspend it. Like that's like what is it called? Is it like in
Like,
factories they do
like
line work, right? No, what
oh,
is it called?
like not a conveyor belt type approach.
Yeah, like conveyor belt work because I will go like and ink every piece that I need to ink. Like I'm doing right now with flowers, right? So, or with leaves for the big piece. So first stage was, transferring my sketch, then, outlining every single one of them. Then the second phase is creating a larger outline so I can create line weight. And then the next stage is cutting them out. Then the stage after that is actually painting the edge. And then after that, the stages is when I shade them. So it's you basically finishing whatever you started. Like that's the easiest way I think to explain it.
I think
Make
that
sense?
definitely makes sense, and it helps answer
Okay.
the other question that we have had about any advice or tips for people who are just starting to make shadow boxes. Do you have anything to add to what you've already explained?
Yes. Research your materials. Whatever you're using, look up paper composition, look up the chemistry of paper and things like that. If you're working with paper, if you're working with wood, do the same research into wood. If you're working with ink, do it with ink. Because any manufacturer usually has a list of what chemicals they use, and you can see how those chemicals will interact with each other, especially long term if you want to preserve your work. I'm obsessed with having my work basically still be looking like it looks right now 500 years down the road because I'm obsessed with, you know, not dying. And that's the
Living
only
on
way.
forever.
We're getting dark here. Uh,
Well, Joseph
that
always says also he wants his art to outlive him, and I think most
Yeah. Oh
artists
yeah.
want that. Of course, and
It's
of course the gallery wants that too because we want art to be enjoyed for generations.
so basically it's a very selfish and narcissistic notion of that's the only way to stay immortal, right? So
Well, you don't have kids, so I guess it's another way of having kids just being
yeah,
put out into that world. It's human.
and I can
It's,
have more
it's
kids than I could otherwise.
and yeah, and showing I think those steps through those leaves is really great because it shows people how much is involved and as Albert said, it is like a factory line. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think the archival properties are really important. And I think that a lot of artists don't even think or touch upon that until mistakes happen. And with whatever medium you're using, you can have so many problems and they may not
Mhm.
surface right away either. That's the other thing. It might take a couple years for a finished yellow or paper to wilt. And that's not something that you want because you're making something so special and you've worked so hard on it. So that is great, great advice. And then another question, have you ever thought of having your own factory line of assistants?
I would love to if I could afford them.
Yeah. You have an intern, right? Or an assistant right
I
now?
have a part-time assistant. He is currently social distancing, so I haven't seen him 2 months, 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Most of Q1 he hasn't worked, so everything has been on me, which is yeah, I don't sleep anymore.
Yeah. But you should sleep
So
because it's good for you. Don't
so
not sleep.
yeah. I do have a part-time assistant, and I also he's also my mentee. I would love to basically train my own replacements so I could, take a vacation.
Yeah.
Um, that would be great because basically, I give him whatever he needs to do for 2 weeks, and I can just not worry about it. But we're not there yet.
One day.
Um, yeah, let's hope. So it's incredibly actually hard to find good personnel because I need someone who is has the right follow through to work step by step like I tell them to, and I also need someone who takes autonomous, action as well. So sees something out of line and something not working and fixes it. Which,
Absolutely.
yeah, those people are either not existent or incredibly expensive. So
Are really hard to find.
yeah, good
Yeah.
help is hard to find, right? Is
Yeah.
that is that what you're saying? Yeah.
I'm with you. I feel the same for the gallery. We're so particular about who we let in because it reflects not just our business, but your business and so many others. And so you have to be so discerning. And I completely get it.
I like
So
how you once mentioned you can't let your assistant ever pack anything because they don't care nearly as much. And I found that to be true actually.
yeah,
With
it's,
packaging orders. Yeah.
I'm sure some people do and have, but it's the care and it's the experience and just kind of through time kind of knowing what's sufficient in material and just if you have that morsel of uncertainty, just packing it up a little more just in case. I mean, you
Mhm.
save a wealth of money and problem if you just give a little more cushion to your artwork before it ships.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So, all
Also,
right.
it's always fun for you to unpack it for like half an hour.
I know when Daria's work, whenever it arrives, always takes quite some time to unpack. But it's always perfect when it arrives, and so totally worth it, and we're quite grateful for that. Do you have actually any of the tools that you use to cut paper by you so we can
Um,
see them?
yeah, of course. So I actually I used to use a lot of here. Let me, sorry, tight space nowadays. So I used to use a lot. I still do. I just have to be careful. I cannot be tired while using those because I slip a lot. I'm very clumsy. I'm one of those people who walks into glass doors because I just don't pay attention. It's pretty bad. So I used to use Barton Parker scalpels. I still do most of the time. Number 11. Those are actual medical scalpels for small surgery and small animal surgery. They're incredibly sharp. If you do work with them, please to God be careful because you will not notice as you cut yourself. They're that sharp. So this is what they look like. And I do still use it sometimes for small detail, but I have to be well rested. I don't trust myself. I cut myself once and I bled pretty severely and it had to be stitched. So, and I have a few cuts that I just glued together, back together. It's like, nah, you don't need to go to the doctor, just put some super glue on
The
it.
other side of creating all the dangers.
Right? So nowadays I actually switched to Excel handles and I have always two at hand. And I have one that it sounds silly, but because they get so dirty, because I work with ink a lot, I have a separate one that I use for pictures. Whenever you guys see me posting on Instagram and you see a blade laying around, it's actually a different one because this looks
Mhm.
absolutely disgusting. And this is what they look like when they're new.
Oh wow, look at all that
Yeah, it's a
wear.
big difference. And this one
Yeah.
is maybe 3 months old. Like
Oh
it's not that
wow.
old. I have to replace them pretty often because they wear down. But the ergonomic shape helps with any pains that you might experience in your thumb and or in your wrist right here,
Is
right?
it malleable, the handle?
Yeah, they're slightly soft.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, think of a kitchen mat, but a little
A little
more
stiffer.
soft. Yeah, a little
Yeah.
stiffer. So I always have two on hand, and these tools are the two tools that never leave my desk. I can show you this one second. I've made, you will see the rest of my studio now. I have made a holder over here. So I have everything tiered so I can work blindly if necessary. So I don't have to pay attention while I grab
Smart.
my tool. And otherwise I use a lot of surgical tools. So for really teeny tiny details, I actually work with
Wow.
one sec, there we go. With surgical tweezers, artery scissors. So these are actually used in surgery. So, and just basic surgical scissors. And I have a tiny whetstone to sharpen all that stuff. Whenever I need to get under the layers, I have these guys because I
Oh
have
wow.
some to place more. So they allow me to go at an angle. And I have two different ones for two different angles.
You are
So
fully
you can
equipped.
see.
You are the paper
Oh yeah.
surgeon.
um, so and I do use mostly Excel blades as well. I found them to be better than X-Acto, much, much better. And
Hold your thought because we're
that's,
going to get kicked off in 10 seconds.
oh,
Let's
okay.
come right back. and we'll keep going on the tools. So everyone join us again, and we'll wrap up eventually after we discuss more about these guys. Okay, be back.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
we're back. All right, so continuing with the tool tour.
Sorry. So then major paper cutting that just straight large lines. I use Japanese scissors, stainless steel, Canary brand. They're
Is
also
there something?
ungodly sharp. Hmm?
Why
I'm sorry.
Japanese scissors specifically?
They make actually the best kind of steel scissors. If you want to go for small, tiny surgical tools, you go to Germany. If you want to go for knives and or large scissors, you go to Japan.
Mm.
So there's actually a full-on village that does nothing but produce cutting tools.
Wow. You're gonna have to
Um,
visit there too when you go to Japan.
oh yeah, I might move there. And if you guys do acquire these, also be careful because I was cutting a piece of paper and I didn't pay attention and I snipped through my finger before, which was pretty traumatic. So I think well, otherwise on cutting tools, so I have a special device that I bought for foam board cutter, excuse me. Because I use acid-free foam board for backing the back layer and backing the sides and making them stable. Because that's the only thing that's actually acid-free. Wood is not acid-free and neither is Gator board. All the artists will know what I'm talking about. So, and I also have a small paper cutter and a large paper cutter and a large mat cutter. I have a bunch of tools like in the main area of my studio. You're currently in my little like horse-shaped desk setup because I have my main desk and two side desks. One has a lot of electronic stuff on it, and the other one has a bunch of crap that I just throw to the side.
Well, you have a lot of things you have to work with and a lot of material.
Oh, yeah. And I have a separate table that I use for framing and similar.
Yep.
So, what else? What other questions did we have?
Yep. Those are all the questions. So we'll begin wrapping up unless there was any more questions. Again, feeding frenzy
10 seconds
and
left.
auspicious beast. We'll give you guys another moment to send anything our way, should you have them. And for those who are only joining this time around, these are inkworks that are shadow boxes, and we have Daria here talking with us about them today. They're multi-layered. There's an incredible sense of depth and shadow. And this is Feeding Frenzy. And we have Auspicious Beast. And if you guys missed anything earlier, this will be up on our stories for 24 hours, and then we will upload it to YouTube. So question came up about frames. They're asking, how do you pick your frames, and do you make your own frames?
So I actually have scoured the internet for any type of shadow box frames, and I have found multiple old school manufacturers that would do them very custom, where I pick the design, but that's currently too expensive for my budget. So I found a manufacturer I actually used the middleman, so I didn't know they were from Italy. So I found out this time because I bought really large 9.5 feet sticks of molding this time because I ran out right in the middle of the quarantine and I needed to frame like 3 pieces. So I had to take larger frames that I already prepared and chop them down, which was a huge waste. So I'm stocked up now. But yes, I do them myself. So I have my little sample corner right there. I'll tilt the phone. As you see, so all those are the deep shadow box style moldings that I'm able to get. And I always keep them close by. And I also have a close relationship now with the manufacturer, so I get notified if they release anything new or if they decide to uh, stop or discontinue one of them. And I do everything in batches. So I prepare my frames in batches, and you guys are gonna see a bunch of stuff storage. So I have actually lot of, excuse me, a lot of frames prepared and batched hanging on my wall for upcoming pieces. So, oops, excuse me, my limb. So yes, everything is done by yours truly, basically.
Yes. And with museum glass too, to boot. So,
Yes, which is a pain in the ass to cut because it scratches super easily.
but it's the best glass you can find and use for artwork. It's protectant, but it's also so clear. So again, my phone makes strange glares because of the lens, as you see that floating orb of light, but really it's just so crystal clear and there's just no interference with what you're looking at when you have these works in person. So another question, inquiring upon how much time you spend on one piece.
On average, I would say about 140 hours, but the average is calculated towards a 9 by 9. So,
9 by 9 size, right?
yes, 9 by 9 size with 2.5 inches depth. So, the Auspicious Beasts piece, that is the smaller one that you see, is 14 by 14 by 275, 2.75, excuse me. And that took around 200 something hours. I know because I was scrambling to finish it. With
But
the shark, it took, hmm?
do you work on other pieces simultaneously? So you might step away for a little bit, or do you complete
it,
one in one, obviously, for many hours, but without interruption?
it heavily depends. So let's say the humongous piece that I'm working on, right? This beast, literally, it's a beast. It's almost the size of me. Erica, she's gonna be larger than you.
Is she?
I think so, yeah. He's pretty, he's pretty large. Sorry, that was a terrible joke. Um,
We need for
and
scale perspective. I'm horrible with the dimensions, so it
I
helps.
am, yeah, I'm unusually tall, so for a female. And with her, I have to step away because she already 850 hours, and we're about maybe 30% in.
Wow.
Um, yeah, she's gonna take a long time. Also, I start hating whatever detail I'm working on because I have to do it. I do it in steps. So stepping away actually makes me like miss it and go back to it. Um, the shark took about 3.5 months to work on, but I have perfected technique by now, so he would be done faster nowadays.
But as you
Um,
perfected your technique, you've also grown your depth and your number of layers in your
yeah.
piece.
Oh,
And
yeah, that
you're
is true.
so it kind of counteracts that a bit, doesn't it? It's always so
Yes,
funny when
definitely.
collectors, ask, well, why is this priced like this? And when you break it down to the number of hours that has gone into these pieces, and when you divide that by the
Don't do
overall
it.
price, you're
Don't do
on
it.
poverty level. You're making pennies.
Don't do it.
So we don't like to go there, but for those who have bought Daria's work or have considered or any artist's work, it's you're getting such a bargain for their time and for their experience.
Like we don't do math here.
No.
We don't break it down
And
to the hour. That's a
no,
bad idea.
I don't like numbers. I like art. So, but it's just something, for those to keep in mind for those who price their work, but also for those who collect work to understand the true value of what they're getting.
Yeah,
And
that is true. Oh, back to your question if I work on multiples. So it depends. So last solo show, I worked on all 12 of them pretty much simultaneously, which left me with a terrible, terrible job of finishing the top layers all in a row for all 12 of them, which was personal hell.
You live and you learn.
right? So this time I'm trying to get them because I get bored. I start getting bored with the piece once I'm done with the main characters and the main fill. So by the time you get to the frontal rocks and the closing layers, it's the point of, oh, why the fuck am I doing this? Oh,
It's
excuse me. I'm cursing again, my
okay.
apologies.
I don't think Instagram
Um,
has rules against cursing.
okay, that's good. So, the most fun part, like I have a piece that I've been working on off and on that's a 9 by 9, right, in color.
With
And
color.
I've already finished the most fun parts, which is the main character and the middle ground. So now we're coming towards the tedious part, and that's why I'm dragging my butt on it, and that's why she's been in progress for 2 years. So, but yeah, that's basically it. I try to go through the full piece and then start with another one. Just
That
creates a better flow.
yep,
Live
makes
and
sense.
learn,
And
right?
yep, through your experience working on multiple pieces versus maybe one or two, you figure out what best methodology works. And so,
But
since you brought up your color piece, one
mhm.
final question, which is going to come from me, is to go in depth a bit more about your decision to work monochromatically. I know we spoke about this last time, but I think it's quite important for people who missed that to get to know your work in that light.
Oh yes, of course. So I black and white and monochromatic does not allow you to skate by because it puts the narrative first, it puts the concept first, it puts your actual technique first, and it puts oh my God, what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm blanking.
No, we've been on here for a while. The technique, the narrative.
Composition. That's what I'm thinking. Thank
Okay.
you. Yes, composition first. So with color, it's easy to juxtapose warm and cold and dark and light in a way that tricks the viewer to look past your mistakes. So it's easy to make something look pretty and beautiful in color because that's what we're used to. We are constantly bombarded by especially certain color palettes and elements. Like if you see, red, you always see red and blue as opposing colors. Like one's good, one's bad. But you're so trained to that if I make a piece that's red and blue, you automatically will like it. I'm a little bit of a masochist, I guess, on my own thing. So I want to push my craft as far as I can go without trickery. So the more I'm learning and the further I can go with my pieces, the more you will also see it, right? So the increase in layers, the increase in shading, the increase in depth. So I'm also creating depth where there's none. So I'm actually tricking your eye because I'm learning my craft better. With the color, it's fun to work with color, but I get bored very quickly. I like spot color whenever I want to lead your eye a certain way. And color also eats up a lot of shadows. So as you look at her, she looks far more flat because of the color, right?
Yep.
Even so, she has the same depth of I think it's 1 second. I have rulers. Yeah, 2 inches. She has 2 inch depth, but it's swallowed up by the actual color. Where the black and white allows me to focus on my values in a way that, and I'm talking shading values, not societal values. Allows me to focus on my values in a way that I decide where you look first. I decide how you look at the scene, right? So I'm telling an exact story to you that you're picking up, but reinterpreting your own way. So if you really pay attention and spend a little bit time with a piece, let's say like 3 to 5 minutes maximum, you should be able to read exactly what I'm trying to tell you.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. And it's also a bit of a hallmark for you too. And I think that in this genre, artists need to be recognized for certain attributes. So when you are at a gallery or at an art fair or just going through your feed on social media, you'll recognize that this is Dara's work. And it's, I think, through obviously the
Oh,
technique of shadow box, but also her choice of monochromatic palettes and her stylization of the female form and the recognizable faces that her work holds. And I think that's quite important because with all famous artists, those tendencies exist and they become household names and, just psychologically something that people become comfortable and familiar with as a result. And so before we go, yes, it is what makes Daria the Shadowbox Master, which everybody has said. I
thank
agree.
you.
Um,
Thank you.
Albert missed Dorito
Like,
coming on earlier, so maybe we'll have him join us as we say goodbye. Let's wake him up again, the poor guy. Every time Burrito's gonna hear my voice, he's gonna say like, "Oh, I have to wake up now." So
the
let's.
more we wake him up, the less he'll wake me up in the middle of the night. So
Oh,
I'll
good.
do that.
We should have had him just with us the entire time. So if you don't mind bringing him on camera again, just for
Yeah.
closing out and for Albert to see, because Albert requested.
Good boy. Oh, he's a good boy.
Here comes Burrito. He looks so bothered. Oh, there he is, bigger than ever now. How big is he going to get, do you think?
I think he's done growing. I feel like he's been growing a little bit though. He should have been done a few months ago. Oh, he's hiding.
Oh, I feel like he looks bigger than the last time we spoke.
He's about 9.5 pounds currently of
Oh, he's like, I
beautiful
want
pup.
my bed back.
Yeah.
I'm over this social media business. Put me down, mom. All right, so thank you guys all. Look at his face. Look, does he have like yellow fur?
So yeah, the males actually have something. So right there, it's called a scent gland. He's like, let me down. Um, and only males have that. So they don't mark the territory like cats or dogs do by peeing. What they do is they slobber, they quite literally they lick something and then they rub themselves like this, which is very freaking adorable. They also wiggle their butt while they do that.
That's
So
really cute.
yeah,
Well,
so it's called a scent gland basically.
no,
So
that's something I did not know. Our cats tend to just rub over everything, and thankfully they don't pee over everything. But the rubbing is
no,
a
no,
fact.
they're actually latrine animals. So they have an area in the wild as well. So they like cats. He uses a cat litter box. And he's very
Yeah.
particular, like it has to clean all the time. So whenever he
Oh
goes
boy.
pee, he waits for me, and if I'm not moving fast enough, he goes like he clicks at me,
Oh
like
yeah.
hurry up,
He's
clean
so
up my litter
smart.
box. So
Wow.
it's like having a cat that can climb everywhere and pinches you.
Well, I hope they're not as destructive as cats because if they do climb everywhere, cats really do destroy a lot more.
Not so far, thankfully. He does steal a lot of stuff though from me. Like he goes through my purse and steals my candy. So now I have to hide my candy.
He's a little scavenger. It's in his nature. All right.
And he
So
definitely tried to get into the trash. Sorry.
I bet you have to keep that kind of closed in a drawer someplace. But yeah, so we're gonna close off now. I know it's getting to be dinner time by me and soon enough by you, and you have work to do. So I will relieve you of this. But thank you so much for your time and answering all our questions and for your incredible work. And thank you guys all, especially those who've asked a number of questions. We love answering them and we're grateful for you. And we'll check in with everyone again soon. DM me or DM Daria if you have other questions. And if you are interested in any of these pieces, I am here to talk to you about them. So otherwise, look out for Daria's show later this year. And we'll touch base with all of you again soon. So, bye.
Thank you guys. Bye bye.